and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. I wondered 20 years ago when Ag PhD TV started, if we would have spent a whole 5 to 7 minutes talking about manganese, Brian, but we're going to do just that today, manganese, because it's of growing importance to farmers across the country.
Well, the other thing we probably wouldn't have spent a whole lot of time on 20 years ago was resistant weeds, but that is one of the biggest topics in agriculture today. Well, certainly you can use different herbicides, but we want to talk today about cultural practices you can use on your farm to stop or at least slow down resistant weed species.
Well, we'll see how your cultural practices do trying to stop our weed of the week. Hopefully you can identify this weed. We're going to talk about it later in the show. And first, here's our Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
One of the most important things farmers have been interested in over the last few years is understanding which mode of action their herbicide has. So over the last few years, Darren and I have been developing a number of different apps. The mode of action app is one of those.
All right, there's a number of reasons why you want to know this as a farmer, and really even as a landowner, homeowner, whatever it may be. If you've got weeds that you need to control, unfortunately some of those weeds are resistant to some of the different pesticides that are out there on the market today. Well, if you know, hey, I have an ALS resistant weed, like pigweed for example, well, I don't want to use an ALS-resistant herbicide. So it's kind of a way for farmers or anybody using these herbicides to double check to see, all right, I have this weed that's resistant to this one. I want to make sure I have a product that's in a different family.
Well, you can look these things up yourself. If you want to look on any pesticide label, it will typically have whatever mode of action that happens to be. In other words, the group. It will be a herbicide group, for example. So you can look that up. But that takes quite a bit of time to do that, and a lot of times you're out in a field, you're busy, so that's why we've got the Ag PhD Mode of Action, or MOA, app that we talk about quite often. I use it myself on our own farm. There are certainly many of the products I realize right away, oh yeah, it's this mode of action, that mode of action. But every once in a while, and especially with some of the newer products, I go, yeah, I don't really remember what mode of action am I in, or have I used enough different modes of action? Am I applying different modes of action, period, on my farm? Those are simple things you can look up using the Ag PhD Mode of Action app.
Well, it's kind of nice too as you set out a multi-year plan. For example, many farmers where we farm will plant corn on a field one year, and the next year they'll plant soybeans, and then the third year they're back to corn again. So they can look between their corn and soybean rotations. All right, let's just lay out all the products I'm going to use in each of these two crops to try to control water hemp, which is a resistant weed to several chemistries where we farm. And they can lay out, here's all the products I used. Now, am I using the same families every single year? Maybe I need to make some changes there, and you can see some other products that you could use to try to hit that same weed with multiple modes of action.
If this is information that would be helpful to you, we really encourage you to download the free Ag PhD Mode of Action app today. One other thing we encourage you to do is control weeds like our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Helping folks work the land, all ag equipment parts for your machine, your tractors and combines are your extra set of hands. And day after day, we'll keep you running. Your ag partner from sun up to sundown. Worthington Ag Parts, quality people, affordable parts.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
Nodulation. It's essential for nitrogen fixation in soybeans, but how can you help it happen in your fields? Monsanto BioAg offers inoculants that answer that question. Microbial seed applied solutions that work to establish high populations of rhizobia in your fields, helping with optimum nodulation and increased performance in your soybeans. Learn how inoculants powered by nature can help you at monsantobioag.com/inoculate.
Avoid the V-shaped pattern of injury caused by chemical buildup in your booms. The Express End Cap from Hypro eliminates the dead ends that lead to herbicide buildup and provides easy access to your booms, giving a complete flush between applications. Hypro, helping you spray better.
There are micronutrients throughout the league, Joe, but let's take a look at Micro 500.
Yeah, the synergy of the micronutrients in this guy have raised the bar on the field. Those others are just wannabe Micro 500s.
So you think this is the player you'd want on your team?
You bet, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, Micro 500 always has a place on the field.
Okay. You can check out Micro 500 stats at agroliquid.com.
Do you need manganese for your crops to achieve top yield? Well, of course you do, but how much? That's really the question.
Well, here's the thing with all these nutrients, there's ways to measure it. You can find out how much is in your soil, you can find out how much is in your crop. The question is, where is that level that's going to make a difference for you, and how do you identify if manganese is a yield limiting factor on your farm?
Okay, the first thing is with the soil test. A lot of times we're talking about 20 to 40 parts per million on a DTPA test. With a Malek test, maybe you're going to want a little bit higher level, but all I can tell you is you've got to get that manganese test done on your soil test. We find so often NPK, maybe soil pH, maybe a couple of other things. Some people will test zinc only. Manganese, it's super important. You need good manganese levels in your plant. What we found here over the last few years is, number one, I think about standability in my crop. Yes, potassium's the most important nutrient, but manganese is number two. Second thing is, if you have better manganese levels in your plant has a little bit more tolerance to white mold, Sclerotinia white mold. Well, that's a really big deal. So you've got to get good levels of manganese, yes, in the soil, but ultimately you've got to get them in the plant.
We've heard from farmers across the country that said, you know, I started putting on this micronutrient blend and I saw better plant health and better stress tolerance. Yes, micronutrients are really important in a lot of the functions that are happening within your plant. Brian mentioned a specific disease that it appears when we've got higher levels of manganese, we have less of that disease present. I'd say that would be the case for a number of different diseases because we're improving plant health. Now, getting manganese into that crop, that's where the challenge gets to be. There's a factor that we were talking about here just a minute ago. Brian said, well, we're seeing a lot of this and that on soil tests. One of those factors that I want to look at in addition to manganese is soil pH. On our own farm, we've seen a correlation when our pHs get up towards 7 or even over 7. We have a really hard time to get manganese to show up on the soil tests. When our test levels on pH come down into the low 6s where we want them, low to mid 6s, all of a sudden we see manganese parts per million start rising up on those soil tests to match.
Okay, so let's say you have high pH soil and you go, uh-oh, this could be a problem for me. I might apply manganese and I could go broadcast spread it. I can put manganese sulfate out. Yes, you can do that. Number one, it might not all be available in the first year, but two, it might get tied up in that high pH. So how am I going to counteract that? The first thing I would look at is putting some out with the planter. You can use a little bit in furrow, got to be careful there. Otherwise 2x2. But you can put a fair amount of manganese in a 2x2, and then you've got it fairly close to the plant. It's less likely to get tied up. You're much more likely to get those levels up in the plant, and they should show up in your plant tissue analysis. Now, if you're seeing during the course of the growing season, your plant tissue analysis isn't good, you can foliar feed with manganese. Many different products many combinations include manganese. So if you would like to do that, or even just run a straight manganese product, you absolutely can, and apply some of that foliar.
We've seen better luck with those foliar type applications with chelated manganese rather than something like manganese sulfate. So it's one of those things where you kind of get what you pay for. When you buy a little more expensive version of manganese, but it's chelated, now we're actually getting it into the crop. The other thing that we saw this year at the Ag PhD Field Day site, for example, where we needed some manganese in the crop, we had applications done multiple weeks in a row, but we didn't get any rain, and we didn't get manganese into the crop. As soon as we got rain, boom, we got it in there. So you do need some moisture to get those types of things to work.
One last thing I guess I would mention is with Roundup, a lot of people say, oh boy, we're affecting the manganese levels in the plant when we apply Roundup. Look, we haven't seen a change in manganese levels in the plant, even putting 100 times worth of Roundup out there. So I'm not buying into that whole argument. What I am buying into is when we test soils all across the country, and really all across North America, we're seeing tremendous amounts of manganese deficiency. There's a lot of manganese that gets pulled up by the plant every year, and if you haven't been applying manganese, it may be time to start doing it this coming year.
Well, this fall, as you're doing your soil test program, make sure that you're measuring manganese and the other micronutrients in addition to soil pH, NP and K, and all those other good things. One other thing you want to watch for in your fields is our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4 inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
We love the quality, we love the construction. We're looking forward to working with Morton in the future.
They have this down to a science. They know exactly what you want. They know how to make it happen. It's an easy process.
I would definitely recommend Morton. From the first time I met the salesman to the last nail that the crew put in, it has been a positive and professional experience.
I'm so happy I found Morton because they just make the job so easy.
Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
Out here, great yield starts with great weed control. That's why I choose the system that makes the difference. The system I put to work, because only I know what it takes out here. Yield's what it's all for. But keeping my fields clean all season, that's what it's all about. This is my field.
In life, when you put the max in, you get the max out. It's no different for your corn, which is why 40 years of effort have gone into proving that Instinct and N-Serve nitrogen stabilizers do more than just stabilize nitrogen, they maximize nitrogen, so your corn gives you the max in return.
Let's take a look at our picks for the championship season. We've got 10-34-0.
No. I don't want to talk about them. I want to talk about this agro-liquid team. Take a look at this lineup. They got it all. The talent, their players can meet any challenge on any field. The coaching staff, the best I've seen.
So that's your pick? No discussions?
Nope. Agro-liquid is the team. They're going all the way to the championship.
Here at Ag PhD, we talk about herbicides all the time, and we get a lot of farmers who comment to us, can you give us something else other than herbicides to control weeds? You know what, we talk about that all the time, but we're really going to focus on that today. Cultural practices you can use on your farm to help stop or at least reduce resistant weeds.
All right, let's talk about one of the worst ones, Palmer pigweed. I was down in the south now. This has probably been at least 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I was looking at a field, it was a soybean field, and they had 300,000 Palmer pigweeds per acre, 300,000. Wow, it was choking out everything. But you know what? In certain areas of that field, the pressure wasn't as bad. What was different? Planting population. Well, in part of the field, they had planted at a much higher population. Guess what? It crowded out that Palmer pigweed. It shaded out the ground earlier, so we didn't see sunlight getting down to the soil. We didn't see as many new seeds starting to germinate. There's something to it. Now, just a few years back, I was at a trial that Iowa State had run, and they were looking at various planting populations, and I know one of the guys had taken some pictures of what do you see if you're laying on the ground underneath the crop canopy. In some parts of the field where the plants were thick, well, you couldn't see hardly any sunlight. In others, it was light on the ground because they had planted a really low population. Like, for example, some of the guys that say, oh, you can get by with 80 or 90,000 population in soybeans. Wow, you can, I guess. I mean, you'll still have a crop, but you'll certainly have more weed pressure in those fields. So getting your planting population up to a normal level or a little better can certainly help you getting your weeds under control.
We've talked for years here at Ag PhD, the #1 weed killer there is crop canopy. It's better than any herbicide that has ever existed and will ever exist. You want great crop canopy. So there are several steps to getting great crop canopy. Like Darren said, one of those things is planting population. The next thing to look at is what's your row spacing. The closer together you have plants, then obviously the quicker you're going to get good crop canopy. So if you can do that, that's absolutely going to choke out some of those resistant weeds.
Well, if my grandpa was still here, he would tell you, I use tillage. That's how we get stuff under control. And you know what? Tillage isn't the answer for everything, but I remember when we were kids, we would always fight cockleburs. And cockleburs would leave this great big burr on top of the ground. And we saw many of the old timers in that day and age just tilling really deep and trying to bury those seeds deep. Now the downside with cocklebur is we did see germination if it was in the top 5 or 6 inches. But you know what? If you buried it down 12 inches, we didn't see a whole lot of those cockleburs come back.
I love how Darren said tillage isn't the answer for everything, but you know what, Darren? Here's one thing that I do know. There is absolutely no weed out there that's resistant to iron. No weed is resistant to tillage. Tillage will kill every single weed if you do the right tillage. The thing is, a lot of people want to do very light tillage, which doesn't completely kill all the roots, and in some cases doesn't even completely kill the above ground portion of the plant. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh, go till every single acre 18 times this year. I'm simply saying that can be used if you would like to do it as a cultural practice to control resistant weeds on your farm.
Now, one other thing that we're seeing this fall is more and more acres being planted to cover crops. And when you've got cover crop out there, again, we're creating that crop canopy where we don't have the weed pressure coming with some of the winter annuals like mare's tail. So it's been a real effective way to keep mare's tail out of fields. The other thing that we're seeing some of those guys do is go with straight cereal rye, for example, and that way they could spray broadleaf killers through there too if they need to. But on a cultural side, getting that cover crop out there, getting it thick and established early is really important. One other thing that's helped with that, in addition to planting date, seeding rate, and those types of things, has also been fertility. Improving fertility out in soil so we get that cover crop off to a good start and get your normal crop off to a good start when you plant your regular crop. Those things can be real big factors to keep weeds out.
We're seeing more resistant weeds than ever. Resistance to glyphosate, resistance to dicamba or 2,4-D, resistance to ALS herbicides. There are a lot of these things that get worrisome for many farmers. I don't get that worried about it though, because we continue to have herbicide options and we also have all these cultural practices we talked about today to stop those resistant weeds.
Cultural practices are a great way to keep tough weeds out of your field. We'll show you some other ways to stop our weed of the week coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Dow AgroSciences. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
When we were kids, Brian, I remember seeing this weed of the week and thinking, wow, that's a real goofy looking milkweed plant. It doesn't have as wide a leaves as common milkweed, but it still has milk in it, so it's got to be some type of milkweed.
Yeah, and it's got to be a perennial. When you take a look below the ground, you see those huge roots. What could it be? Well, it's hemp dogbane.
Well, you know, this is one of those fields that we're on right now. As kids, Brian, we would walk soybean fields. And when we walked soybean fields, what did we do? Well, when we saw a weed, we pulled it. Well, it was so disheartening when like 2 weeks later, you had pulled a hemp dogbane plant and you thought, I did a great job. There's not a weed left in the field. And 2 weeks later, boom, there's all these hemp dogbane and they looked as healthy as if we had never walked the field.
Well, you know, it was also disheartening is when we'd go around and we'd spray Roundup and it still didn't kill the hemp dogbane. And we thought, what in the world? It can't be resistant to Roundup. What we ended up finding out was this. Our dad was kind of chintzy with some stuff. So he was tight with his money and he wanted us to mix mainly water and a little splash of Roundup when we would go out and spray some of these weeds years and years ago. Well, what we learned is we just didn't have the concentration high enough. So whether we were after milkweed or hemp dogbane, one of the things they have in common, in addition to, of course, being perennial weeds, is they have more of a waxy leaf surface. They're not going to absorb a lot of chemical, so we have to get very concentrated droplets on there. And
well, the other thing is using spreaders and stickers. And when we think about hemp dogbane, it's even tougher than common milkweed. Common milkweed at least has bigger leaves. Now, granted, they're waxy and they tilt, they slope a little bit, so you can't hold a whole lot of herbicide on them. But hemp dogbane's got these tiny little leaves. It's really difficult to get droplets there.
All right, so once we changed the concentration, bumped the rate of Roundup up, lowered the rate of water down, we found, hey, we can actually get really good control here. One of the keys to that, though, is you've got to spray during a good portion of the growing season. What I mean is when we sprayed super early in the spring in some burn down stuff in no-till 25 years ago, it was too cold yet, and we just didn't get the Roundup translocating well into the plant. We should have either bumped the rate or just waited until the weather warmed up to spray.
Okay, so a lot of these tough to control weeds, like these perennial weeds like hemp dogbane, we get the question from farmers all the time, hey, what about the new 2,4-D tolerant crops? What about the new dicamba tolerant crops? Won't they help me with these perennials?
Well, they're going to burn down the top growth. Are they going to kill the roots? No way. We've never seen 2,4-D or dicamba kill roots in one application. Now, that's not to say if you weren't able to make multiple applications, it wouldn't do something to those roots, because eventually the roots have to get fed by something. So I would just look at, you need to go out there early on with a very strong rate of Roundup, but worst case scenario, you can certainly burn back that top growth and at least hopefully maintain most of your yield with products like 2,4-D or dicamba.
All right, so we do see hemp dogbane in grassy areas too. So here again, we've got grass that we want to keep, but we've got this extensive root system with rhizomes. Roundup's not the answer on grass.
All right, Roundup isn't the answer if you have grass that you're trying to keep. But Roundup is the answer out in crop ground. What I'm looking for here in the grassy areas is probably just a 2,4-D or dicamba, burn it down, then burn it down again, then burn it down again. If you want, you can throw some Tordon in. We have had some success with Tordon. That's about it as far as long-term great weed control on a perennial weed though.
Well, once again, our weed of the week has been hemp dogbane. It's a tough perennial, so get it under control on your farm.
That's it for our Weed of the Week, but stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel-size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high-efficiency farming, there's one name to count on, Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
The buzz on this line is probably the best in 10 years, both in soil and in the plant. Joe, you've been doing this for a while. What's your take?
Well, Don, you take a player like High Energy N, 3 forms of nitrogen, plus sulfur and iron, with slow release technology, he's making plays all season long.
Oh, look at his numbers. He's getting it done.
But don't forget about in response. This guy's designed for a quick release nitrogen.
It's looking like another championship season for Agro Liquid.
N, P, and K. They're critical for a healthy crop. Improve their availability and your yield potential with QuickRoots microbial seed inoculant. QuickRoots technology contains 2 powerful microbes that can help improve access to key nutrients, and it's available in an easy-to-apply formulation. Simply mix it directly into your dry planter box and your seeds will be covered. Learn more at monsantobioag.com/quickroots.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
If you're applying anhydrous ammonia on your farm this fall, safety should be your #1 concern. Here are a few tips in today's Iron Talk. The word anhydrous means without water. When it comes in contact with your skin, it can cause rapid dehydration and severe burns. Keeping this in mind is really the biggest key for safety. Wear personal protective equipment. I know, you've been handling anhydrous for a long time and you feel pretty confident. That's all the more reason to avoid having problems. It's pretty simple. Wear tight-fitting, chemical-proof goggles or a full-face respirator. Rubber gloves that can protect against ammonia are also a must. Coveralls or a heavy work shirt are advised as well. Take a few extra minutes every day also to thoroughly inspect the equipment before each use. Look for cracks on hoses or signs of wear or slippage around the couplers. While most experienced operators aren't scared of a little product in the lines, you are taking a risk if you don't purge the lines each time that you unhook or inspect them. Also, check the toolbar quick coupler regularly and replace as recommended or as wear dictates. When switching from tank to tank, make sure that your hoses are the proper length. Also, always use the safety chains and hitch pin with the safety clip to ensure that the hoses aren't stretched and a tank never comes unhooked. When you're moving to and from fields, the best advice is just not to drive over 25 miles per hour. If you do that, you'll be a lot safer. Now, if you follow all these recommendations, accidents are unlikely, but if you do have one, farmers and custom applicators are required to report the incident to regulatory agencies. So be careful out there and be safe if you're using anhydrous ammonia this fall. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show, but before we go, we want to invite you to tune in to the Ag PhD radio show, where we take your live phone calls each weekday on Sirius XM channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Soil is nature's filter to keep contaminants out of our water. As rain falls on soils and seeps down through, the minerals and microbial life in the soil remove and detoxify nutrients as well as inorganic materials. To learn how farmers manage soil and groundwater, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.